Yo, what up? Have you ever tried to get a good time in the ODM minigame, but you just can't get through that one tree? Do you keep falling to your doom in comically placed holes? Have you reached the end of the forest just to run out of time right in front of the finish line while Mikasa stands there watching, probably laughing at you? Huzzah! No need for the worrying, for this guide is here to help you improve. Or at least it should. See, here's the thing. This minigame is quite random and inconsistent with its layout. And it's hard. Like, really hard to get a great time on it. And I'm not talking about this, or this, I'm talking about this. With that said, this PC only guide, because I don't play in mobile, will explain all of the tips and tricks anyone can use to improve their overall time in the minigame, as well as certain recommendations from me, one of the world record holders for this minigame. I will highlight which tips are for which standard emblem, so it's easier to know which tips are for getting bronze and up, which ones are for silver and up, which ones are for gold and up, and for aspiring diamond brothers, very specific text once the standard emblems have been explained. If you only care about a specific emblem, check out the description for timestamps. Now, before starting, let me get something clear. This minigame isn't for everyone, so the first lesson I can give is know your limits. The rewards for completing the minigame are temporary and will be gone by the time this event finishes. If you don't want to spend hours trying to get the elusive diamond emblem, you don't have to. This is also true if you just want to get server all gold and keep getting frustrated because of it. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone, and it is okay to give up on this minigame if it's too hard or frustrating. With that being said, if you still want to get some cool emblems, we're gonna have to work on some basic movement skills. Let's start on the right foot, shall we? Chapter 1. How do I get off the ground? There are a couple of things you need to know about the physics of this game that you might have missed. The grapple can be undone earlier if you click again before going past it, and will get undone automatically if your character is close enough to the point where you grappled. And the boost is omnidirectional, and it's the reason why sometimes, when you bonk your head on a tree, you'll try boosting and end up going backwards. Also, get used to clicking twice per swing, since it's very common to end up stuck on a tree if you don't release. First things first, get used to the basic controls. Grapple a tree and then release from it to get a feel of how far you go. Then try a different angle, then another one, then another one. Boosting right after a grapple will increase your speed by a lot, and you only need to do it for a bit to get to max speed. No need to overuse your boost. You can also use your boost while not grappling to increase your speed if you're at max speed already, and it's the best way to go fast. As simple as it might seem, this is the most important part to learn. There have been people that have completed the minigame without ever boosting and have gotten good time, and I suggest to try that if you have trouble grappling to the thin trees while going too fast and want to practice. Also, do be careful of going backwards. This can happen when you are bounced off a tree and are not in a grapple state. Grappling to anything while going to the right is recommended to avoid ever going to the left. After you get a hold of the controls, next is combining boost with your regular grapples. You'll want to practice with the Tree Hugger. You'll see what I mean by that later. Anyways, you'll want to grapple above this tree to go up while boosting, then grapple downwards while also boosting a bit. Your goal should be to do a pogo motion without touching the ground, and I've found that it's the best way of developing a feel for when to boost, and also to calibrate how much boost to use per swing. This might be a bit too complex, so feel free to skip this practice if you want to, though I highly recommend it. After a couple of minutes, try advancing through the stage like that. And now for your main movement tech, the bread and butter of your runs, the thing everybody should be using if possible all the time, the GBR, short for Grapple Boost Release. This consists of grappling to a tree, shortly boosting, and then very quickly releasing. The motion lasts for less than a second usually, and should look and sound like this in-game. This will make your character go into the air while keeping a lot of speed and not being bothered at all by the ground obstacles. Certain GBRs will require you to spend quite a lot of your boost, as without it you won't gain enough speed. So try to keep at least half of your boost bar all the time, lest you get stuck in an awkward situation. Chaining a lot of GBRs and other variations of it is key to getting a good time, and should be one of your most practiced moves overall. There are a handful of variations for GBRs. The most common one being to launch yourself downwards in the downwards tree. So just like you practiced before, you should boost downwards to reach the bottom faster. You can even chain this with another long boosted GBR onto the following tree to boost yourself forward. The motion from going from above to below and back up is hard to get used to, but it will get easier every time you do it. And as long as nothing supernatural happens, it should be easy. We'll talk about you later. The other GBR motions that you should use are boosting from downwards to reach the top of this upwards tree, after being caught in this tree stump, boosting out of it, when stuck on this diagonal tree, to boost upwards and then diagonally to maintain a lot of your speed, and some other niche things like changing some angles on the fly. But most of you won't need to do any angle micromanagement to get a good time. However, knowing where to grapple and when to do the release part of the GBR is also crucial to getting good times. Let's talk about those, and how to avoid certain situations. Chapter 2! Help me! There's a tree right up my face. Now that you know how to move, it's time to know where to go, both in the beginning part and the end part of the swing. This is when it's a good idea to do a non-boost run. Although some angles you can only take one boosting to avoid getting your head stuck in a tree. Spoiler alert, this chapter contains most of the bulk of the guide, so buckle up buttercup because we're in this for the long game. Certain angles are extremely common, like the main swinging angle. You want to position your cursor at the top of the screen between the timer and the X button. As long as you boost around the beginning part, you'll have both horizontal and vertical speed. Depending on where you stop grappling, you'll have higher horizontal speed or higher vertical speed. You can maintain a bit of your horizontal angle by doing a very short non-grapple boost when at the apex of your swing. As long as you maintain a good horizontal angle, you'll have a lot of speed. This can be a bit hard to get used to, so no shame on going a bit slower. Tree-specific angles are also extremely important, and are the best time servers if you know how to pull them off. Most of these require coming from certain angles, like coming from above or from the ground. Let's start with the tree stump. If you are on the ground around these parts, do a standard GBR on the upper right part of the tree. If done correctly, you'll go boosting while quickly ascending. If you land on the stump, grapple in the same part as before. The closer you are, the most precise your boost has to be, otherwise you'll waste boost. For both of these examples, you can also boost to the tree to your right if you can't get to grapple to the little spike of the stump. The tree stump is generally to be avoided by swinging above the ground, and if you're boosting fast enough you can ram through it with no problem. However, getting stuck on it is one of the worst time losses you can have, especially if you end up going backwards. The upwards tree has a handful of angles and a very important variation depending on if the downwards tree is right after it. If you're on the ground, grappling around this area with a medium boost will have you climb the whole tree first, and then release once at the whole to go horizontal, depending on when you release. If the downwards tree is right after it, doing the same angle but holding your boost and grapple for longer will catapult you to the ground. If you collide on the top of the screen, grapple around here with a medium-ish boost to maintain horizontal momentum. If you hold it for a bit longer, you also go upwards. The same angle applies if you barely miss the bottom part of the hole. Just remember to time how much boost to use. Try to not grapple directly above your cell phone face with this tree, as a wrong release will have you going backwards. The upwards tree is your best friend when going above the screen, although it tends to come after a thin tree that you have to grapple to enter it quickly. If you can go through a lot of these while keeping your speed, you'll save a lot of time. Now for the downwards tree, probably the most complex of the common three. If you're on the ground and with no horizontal speed, instead of boosting through it, grapple towards these specific parts of the following tree. With a long boost, it'll catapult you with a 45-degree angle if released in these parts of the swing. If you collide with this tree at the top of the screen, grappling around this part and doing a very short boost will push you downwards. The more sharp your angle is, and the more boost you use, the faster you'll ground yourself. Do be careful with this motion. You have to release before touching the ground, or else you will bounce upwards because of not releasing, and lose a lot of time. Those two angles can be comboed off together if you practice long enough, and will result in a smooth getaway from one of the biggest time losses. However, be careful when doing this, because combining the two angles has a very nasty downside. Because of the way speed works in this minigame, if you touch the ground while not actually boosting and losing your speed, certain angles will become harder. If you touch the ground after boosting downwards, and you grapple too high in the next tree once you have no speed, your character will get stuck between the sharp edges of the tree, and be completely stuck. This is what I called getting tree hard. And it's the worst time loss that I can think of other than falling to a pit. You can avoid this by grappling relatively low on the following tree, though it will take practice, time to boost and release to get an upwards angle. The tree hugger, or downwards tree, is the most common time loss you'll have in your runs, and the downwards boost you'll do to ground yourself is the second most common angle of any run, second to a standard swing of course. If by some miracle you miss a swing and happen to maintain all of your speed through a downwards tree, then doing a grapple directly above on any tree while going fast will get you off the ground real quick. Just remember to not boost too much to not get skybounded. At last, the bane of everybody's runs, the diagonal tree. This tree can only appear after you get to 1500 meters on the minigame. One important thing to know about this tree is that, because of its shape, any angle from below and right next to it will cause you to go backwards if releasing properly. For this reason, it's best to try to always approach it while coming from above, though it's not impossible to handle when below its gap. When coming from below, a grapple exactly here in the middle, and a long boost and late release will cause you to do a motion similar to the downwards catapult in the upwards tree. This is the safest way of getting through the diagonal without fearing going backwards, but it is hard to maintain speed after it, unless you have a lot of boost to spare or do it really good. It is also quite strict on where to grapple. If you grapple wrong, you could end up bouncing around it, or worst case scenario, not entering the tree and going backwards. Luckily, there is some counterplay. When coming from above, or after a failed bottom angle, grappling here with a medium boost will cause you to plummet through the tree and gain lots of speed while grounded, if you approach it from above, or it'll make you get stuck inside of the tree if from the middle or bottom. If you fail a grounded angle or boost, then this angle will sort of get you through the diagonal. Though if you can time your clicks for it, it's best to just wait and do the last angle. When grounded, perform two very short boosted GBRs exactly here and here, and you'll get sent straight downwards with quite a lot of speed. This is the best way of getting through the diagonal when grounded, but it requires great GBR control, especially with grabbing and then almost immediately clicking again to release, only to do it 2 more times in quick succession. If you struggle with this angle, try the beginner's one. Sometimes when coming from above, you can completely skip over the diagonal if coming from a very specific angle. When coming from an upwards middle angle near the top of the screen and falling, you can adjust the boost to land between these parts of the tree. If done correctly, you maintain most of your speed and can carry on as usual. You can sometimes bounce on it. One variation of this will be to, while coming from the ground to an upwards angle, get caught by the upper part of the tree, and then get dropped gently in the ground. In extremely rare occasions, even when not coming through the traditional good angle, you can still skip the diagonal, though it's very specific. When having a middle to upwards position, high horizontal speed, and barely falling, shortly grappling in this part of the tree with a short boost will send you on a straight horizontal if released immediately, or slightly downwards if you don't grapple or hit your head on the tree. Probably the coolest and rarest of the time saves, this tech is fit only for those trying to get the best time possible. Even then, you can't rely on it at all, as the angle isn't compatible with all other trees and obstacles, especially this top. If you do manage to get it though, there is no other filler like it in this minigame. The diagonal, or middle tree, has weird hitboxes and will absolutely mess with you when approaching correctly. Having patience and being calm is key to getting through it in a fast or bearable manner. It also has the potential of being one of the best time savers if skipped entirely, as it'll be like there was no obstacle there to begin with. Overall, this is the top ranking obstacle in this minigame, even when taking into account how it only appears at the last 500 meters. Beware of this menace. Alright, and the bird at the beginning is for good luck. Always select the birdie, or else. Alright, that should about cover all the basic info you need for this minigame. If you apply some of these tips to your run, not about none of them, you'll close the gap to getting even a gold emblem. After a bit of practice, of course. These are things that take a bit to learn and put in practice. As long as you persevere enough though, you'll get to those sweet rewards. If you are only interested in getting the regular emblems, then this is all I have for you. They are relatively easy to get even after 15 or 25 attempts, like it took me. However, for those that desire greatness over any reward, or the greatness itself is good enough reward for you, then you know this isn't the one. Come along now, for you shall join me and my diamond brothers in the grind. Chapter 3, The Grind. So, you have decided that you do need to prove yourself to someone. Maybe it's for the reward, maybe it's because you're very close to the 130 mark, maybe you even want to take the world record. And even though it takes a whole another level for a 140 or above, whatever your reason might be for improvement, I shall be a good sport and tell you what separates people from the Diamond Brothers. From this point forward, you'll have to constantly practice even the most basic of tricks. There is barely any clearance in this minigame for mistakes. Even standing still at the beginning is a massive time loss. You'll also have to grab to thin trees consistently. If you can't do that, then getting a 130 gets significantly harder, to the point of not really being worth it. Practice doing short, chain GBRs in each and every tree you see, even those that are close together. It doesn't matter if you miss a couple of them, as long as you're constantly getting that clicking practice done. Once you have completed your clicking practice and can grapple to about every tree, we need to talk boosts. My personal strategy is to always keep as much boost as possible for downward tree and the occasional mistake. Always focus on hovering above the ground and never touching it unless you have to go through a downward tree or you miss a swing. The ground is your worst enemy. It contains the tree stump to lower your speed and boost, the upwards tree which you now cannot approach from the bottom because of the time loss, and after the 1000 meter mark, pits start to show up. These will have no obstacle trees before and after a tiny wall of them spawning, making them the perfect obstacle to spawn when not grounded, and the worst time if you rely on ground boosts. Falling into one is a 6-second time lost, or an instant reset in our case. There is something I said right at the beginning about the game being a bit inconsistent. This is what I truly meant. While very true that the game is randomized, it pulls out from chunks of trees, both background and obstacles, and places them while trying not to repeat itself too much, especially for back-to-back patterns. This can often fail between the 1000 and 1500 meter mark, where new obstacles are generated, and the category of chunks changes. Knowing that the game isn't fully randomized, certain patterns can show up consistently. Some of them include a tree stump right next to a downward tree, a downwards tree followed by an upwards tree, a middle tree right next to a bottom tree, an upwards tree closely followed by a middle tree, and plenty more that you'll find in your runs. Taking advantage of the possible chances of every tree being a certain pattern will save you a lot of time, especially if you can do a good angle in the downward to upward situation, which is why getting tree hooked is so important to avoid. And lastly, a thing that I cannot help you at all: mental state. This game is frustrating at times. You get power RNG, you fail a grapple and fall into a pit, you mistime your boost and collide with a middle tree and lose all of your speed. Those are things that can and will happen to you, oftentimes at multiple points in any run, and it will ruin them. If you are one to have a short fuse, I really recommend heeding my advice about knowing your limits and giving up. Even while for a couple of hours or days, it can help you reorganize your strategy and come back with a fresher mind. In the same topic, if you have an extremely good run with great energy and great DVRs, the best way of throwing it straight to the trash is to panic. The second you start losing control of yourself in this minigame, you'll start making worse and worse mistakes. And in this panic state, your fixes will more often than not fail in spectacular fashion. One must be completely calm throughout the entire run, or risk a late game blunder against a diagonal, the worst type of time loss. For as a wise man once said, be woke, be cool. A calm spirit is smart. There might be times where you are exactly 1 second off the 130, or times where you will have had a great PB, but did a dumb mistake that ate through enough time to fail, and it will sting a lot. But as long as you persevere, then whatever you want, whether that's a reward, an emblem, or a goal you set yourself up, will get closer and closer the more you attempt it. After all, getting that close to what you desire only reaffirms how possible it is to achieve. That is all the advice I can give. Thank you for watching this guide. It sure took a while to get to this point. I started grinding this minigame because I wanted to see what would be the best time anyone could make, and accidentally stumbled upon a very fun challenge to achieve actually. It took me over 10 tries to get the story version of this minigame done, but after a lot of effort and attempts, I managed to get closer and closer to 130, and after surpassing it, I wanted to keep going and get a better time, and I know I'm not alone in that feeling of wanting to do better. This video was actually inspired because of all the people that joined me in the Discord to improve their time, and after helping a couple of them to get diamond or just to get whatever emblems they wanted, I figured I could help more people buy this guide. I can only hope that this guide was of help. Big shoutouts to the Discord people that work with me throughout the journey, the Diamond Brothers group that I hope gets more people thanks to this guide, to Makima, or Makima, whatever it is, for creating the ODM pattern guide and sealing my world record, and to Plap for creating and fixing the minigame, as well as entering one of my grinding sessions and having a long chat with me. It inspired me to continue trying to get a better time. If you enjoyed this video, please do leave a like on it. This is the very first big video I wanted to make, and there might be some others that follow. Perhaps. For now though, take care everyone. I hope everyone enjoys their personal grind as much as I did. Farewell.